This is a special edition of the new Overlords Podcast. We are very excited. I am Max, and with me, of course, is my co-host, Sema. Hello, Sema.
Hi, Max. Hi, everyone.
Today, we're hosting a special Behind the Games interview with a significant chunk of the Broadsword Star Wars The Old Republic studio development team. Significant to us, but a few people from the team. Sullivan Kelly, Ashley Ruhl, who is returning, who we've talked to before in this format, and Keith Kanneg. Hello, all three of you.
Hello.
Hello.
This is super exciting for us. We've been fans for a very long time. We, Sema and I, are very familiar with you all individually and your roles. We've been stalking you for 10 years, on and off, right, as long as you've been with the company, stalking SWTOR for 10 years. But for people that aren't as familiar, let's kick things off and let you introduce each of you and your roles in particular a little bit. So as we go through the questions today, we'll be asking questions specific to your role. I think that'll be a good place to start. So Ashley, welcome back. Why don't we go get back to you on narrative director? Why don't you tell us what that's like?
Hello. Yes, I'm Ashley Ruhl. I'm the narrative director on Star Wars The Old Republic. I've been in game narratives across multiple studios for 12 years, I think, almost as long as, or about just as long as SWTOR's been around, because my first job was actually working on SWTOR as a cinematic designer.
Right.
So I've been bouncing around different studios and doing cinematics and writing and narrative, and currently a narrative director on SWTOR. So my job as a narrative director is basically just to steer the ship, make sure that what we're creating is cohesive to the game that we've built so far, that we're creating content that is going to excite players and touches as much of our fan base as possible, and that I can support our narrative team. I can support Caitlin as the lead writer and work with gameplay to make sure we get all of our ducks in a row and get a really cool experience.
Excellent. Well, we've certainly got some questions for you, including follow-up questions from the last time we talked, which is awesome. Caitlin, so that leads right into you. Why don't you introduce yourself and your role?
Absolutely. As was said, my name is Sullivan Kelly. I'm the lead writer on Star Wars The Old Republic. Next month will mark my 10th year on Star Wars The Old Republic. Okay. I started in January of 2014, and I've been on the team ever since. I started out in QA as a world design analyst. So I was working on leading a group of testers and writing test plans and things like that, working very closely with world designers to make sure that everything was given the proper testing coverage. And from there, throughout the years, I slowly moved into a more narrative-focused position. I was really concentrating on giving feedback to the writers, giving feedback to the cinematic designers, to make sure that the story was cohesive and to make that it fit with the previous things that we've established in the game story, to make sure characters sound like the characters that they're supposed to sound like, things like that. But I was also keeping track of things like choices that you make and characters that appear over time. I've built copious amounts of documentation that track all those things. So at this point, in addition to writing pretty much most of the things that you see in the game, whether it's in the cinematic or a quest mail or a codex entry or a quest journal, I would call myself kind of our unofficial lore keeper. I remember a lot of the stuff even from before I joined the team. I've got most of it up here. I rely on the internet for everything else, but usually when you need like a jumping off point, if design or art or somebody needs some kind of reference, they usually can come to me to help narrow down where to start looking.
Okay. This is excellent. And we've got some questions about
that's awesome.
the characters and where they came from and how you're doing such a great job in pulling people forward and creating new characters that will live on. And now I know where that superpower is coming from. So you've got the reference you've got Wikipedia in your head. So that's excellent.
Almost at this point, I would say, yeah. And 10 years of staring at the website burned a lot of it into my brain.
And then Keith, so you may not remember, Keith, but you and I did meet at the New York Cantina, the last in-person cantina at the New York Comic Con. So I was there. That was a great cantina because it was sort of small. There was like the 2 floors around the bar. You were there with your wife. It was an amazing event. There was a few people there. So I've seen you in person as well, but we've certainly followed you and your work on Star Wars: The Old Republic. Why don't you introduce yourself to anybody who doesn't know, even though everyone should?
Well, thank you. Yes, I do remember back in New York, right? My wife and I were celebrating our anniversary, right? It's always in early October, right? This will be our 45th anniversary coming up next year, right?
Amazing. Congratulations.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and if you tie that to a time frame, that's back in 1977 where we met, and our first date together was A New Hope, right?
Oh
So
my
we've been,
gosh.
all that time together, we've been Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan, so it's. But I'm the EP for the team, right? And what that really means is I have oversight of the entire organization, the business itself, because gaming is still a business, and we need to make sure that we're profitable. We got the right resources, doing the right things, and I try to make sure that things are out of their way, right? Sometimes I get in their way because I play the game so much. I act like a player with privileges, right? Because I can tell them directly the way I feel about stuff, and they all kind of roll their heads and get around their eyes. And right, I have a conversation with Musco about design, right? And it happens on a regular basis, right? But Sema mentioned the Apex server and how she's having a lot of fun. I'm also over there, right? Because it's been 10 years since I got legendary status, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get all 8 characters past, Corellia, and so I can run around with that little legendary status thing, right? And I've got four done already, right? So
Yeah.
it's only been a month, right? So.
Oh my gosh.
But I play the game all the time. People laugh, say, developers never play the game. No, I play it every day, right? I've got something to do every day. I have goals, right? Guilds that I participate in, right? But on a regular basis, I'm just talking to the dev team. I'm talking to the leadership, right? I'm doing a lot of things that keep the team focused on what our goals are and our vision are, right? That we have. Jackie mentioned where we're going to do a producer letter here in the next couple of weeks. And I'll put out just kind of basically what we're doing over the next 6 months. It'll be probably looking back as to what we accomplished this past year. People get to read all that, right? And see what's coming down the pipe in the next few months, right? So
That's excellent. One of the things you mentioned in there is what I really think that kind of the executive producer and any of the executive roles in a company are for, which is getting rid of the barriers, getting the barriers out of the way. You can provide your input and they can choose to accept it or not. there's that whole kind of thing. But as the team needs to do their job, you being there to break down any walls and to make sure that the resources are lined up and to remove any of those barriers, I think that's excellent. And from our perspective, you must be doing a really good job, because let's talk about 7.4 now, and not only 7.4, but all of the things that have been happening along the year, and not only just happening, but happening like clockwork. So this is something that's really impressed us, even through how things have changed for you all as a team over the course of the past year. We're still getting the movement to the cloud, the infrastructure changes, the cadence of the story, the cadence of the updates that you promised are being delivered. And I think that's under-recognized. If you weren't meeting those promises, that would certainly be recognized, and that would be big news, and everybody would yell about that. So why don't you start there? The road to 7.4. We could talk about what's in 7.4 next, but how is that feeling to you all?
All right, let me start it this way, all right? I look and say, I'd love to take credit for all the way the team operates, but in reality, they are such a coordinated team, right? They work together hand in hand. There aren't any silos on this team. I think we have built a culture around communication amongst the team. Everybody, as Caitlin pointed out, everybody, when they have a question, they don't just go research on it. They ask. They put it up in a channel and they talk about it. We have long discussions about things that we believe our players want. We don't always agree, right? And that's okay. That's healthy. They don't, as you just point out, don't necessarily do what I suggest, right? And that's also healthy, because I'm not dictatorial, right? From my standpoint, I leave it up to all the design leads. I leave it up to the engineering leads and people on the team to work together, figure out what they want to do, and then place that within a schedule of time frame that we've allocated. We said, this is what we want. And, Ashley and team said, okay, this is what we can do in that time frame. And everybody rallies behind them, right? And says, okay, this is how we're going to execute against that. And I'll let them talk about their process and how they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the design leadership, since our big transition last year when I was brought into this role and we had our new suite of design directors, we've been really, really thoughtful about making sure that we're communicating up and down within our teams and that we are getting the information from our teams of what we want to do, what we want to create, what we can create, and then doing a lot of cross chatter between those departments and how can we collaborate more. And then from there, we can build a plan of the content we want to build. And so that's made it a lot clearer, a lot clearer path forward for us to have that kind of communication. And it's tough because everybody has different priorities within their disciplines to build the thing that is the most important thing to them. And so it takes a lot to be those voices that keep connecting each other and saying, hey, how does that relate to this? How are we supporting you in that? And make sure that we have the scope to do so. But we're being very thoughtful about that kind of communication. And I think that has led to a lot more of a predictable cadence as we've been releasing content.
Oh, that's excellent. As I said, it's definitely recognized. The other point that I think is really recognized even from the outside, as you've gone through things like your anniversary and you talk about the other roles, and Jackie's done such a great job of pulling other people into the dev streams. It's such a cohesive team and a team of so many of you. I mean, as Caitlin's saying, you all have been touching the game for years and years and years. My experience in corporate teams or even in other studios that we've talked to have a team that has such depth of experience and years of working together across so many of the roles is pretty rare. And that's got to be an accelerator to you being able to both communicate, but almost, just telepathically know what each other is thinking and doing and how you're going to respond and being able to move forward on that. Is that sounding correct, Caitlin? Is that do you read Ashley's mind when you come up with some of your decisions on story?
Well, I was going to say I wouldn't go as far as saying telepathically, but maybe it depends on the person, because I feel like Ashley a lot of times will say things like, oh, I was just thinking that exact same thing. So yeah, it depends on the person, but there are plenty of people on the team who, like you mentioned, have just as much of experience as the rest of us do, particularly with SWTOR, and just knowing what they know and knowing kind of how they operate and knowing how they communicate is a really helpful thing, because it makes everyone just so approachable. And it's after and everything, we can't all get together and hang out, obviously, because we still have some people who work remotely and don't work in Austin. But a lot of us do have that experience of just like being around each other for X many years, and we have all these shared experiences and shared stories going back for many of us as far back as before launch. There's a bunch of people on the team who worked on the game since before launch.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because we tend to think of before launch as a whole different group of people, but it really wasn't.
Right.
Had people reaching back.
It wasn't, I feel like.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of other people, but there's still some veterans who have stuck around. I think, Ashley, weren't you here before launch on one of your contracts? And then you came back?
My first contract was, I kept coming back and leaving, but my first contract was, it started in February of 2011. So I was here for launch. And then my contract ended right after the game launched.
I've been here since April 2011, right? And had a variety of roles being on the team. When I got to take over the producer role in the end of 2016, it was, why are you qualified to do this, right? But at the time, there was a lot of difference of opinion as to whether or not the game was going to be successful after 2016. But here we are in 2024, right? We've obviously done a lot of good things, right? This team is very veteran, as you point out. There's people that have been on the team, 13, 14, 15 years, right? And, in my case, this is my 13th year, right? And I'm just as excited now as it was back then, right? But to your other point, it's a very cool team to be on, right? A lot of cooperation, a lot of friendships here, right? A lot of people that have opinions, but they respect everybody else's, right? And so there isn't any of that nastiness that you see on other teams. We just don't have that.
Yeah,
here.
that's excellent. That's excellent.
We raid together.
Yeah, we raid together. We did a raid last night. It was pretty
Really?
fun,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So,
And now I have a whole different picture.
Yes. Yeah, Sema and I have our ops team tonight. We're going to be working on our tech frags to upgrade our gear. So I guess let's get into that next. 7.4. 7.4 has hit this week. We've certainly been in there. We've been anticipating it for a while. It is finally here. Sema guessed the date. I don't know if you guys heard that news, but about a month ago.
I heard that.
Sema, we always ask Sema to predict the date, and she's pretty good. You know, Sema's actually got a project in a
We
tech
also have a pretty
background.
selective memory about that. We sort of remember
Well,
the ones that...
maybe we're remembering that Sema was always correct, you know, whether or not.
That's right. She's always right. Right.
Yes.
She probably looked at the PGS days today to coming down to me out a few weeks on that and go, oh, here's in time frame.
Exactly. But we got a ton. We got story, we got world boss, we got the gear upgrades. We're all working on new gear, which we find really fun. We got Ord Mantell and the daily areas. So let's go through a little bit of that. And getting back to that point that we just got off of this long history and all of the knowledge in your head, Caitlin. Let's start there with the story. What's it like to have these long running stories? So we've got a long running story that we're in right now, which is Chains in the Dark is sort of another chunk in the middle of that story. We're not done yet, and we're not going to spoil the story here yet, but or when we talk about it. But talk about that. How do you think of that arc, and then what's it like to sort of articulate that kind of long running story arc? I mean, have you written it all? Is it all done, and you just are just chomping at the bit to get it out there, or
God,
are you like
I wish
letting
that
it?
would be amazing.
Are you like letting it grow, or is it like not done? You don't even know where it's going to go. So tell us about that.
So I would say it's a middle ground for sure. Where we're headed with this particular story arc is something that's been, I would say, in the works since before Charles left. Probably right before he left was when we started really putting down the stakes along the way, the guideposts of what the story was going to be. And then when, like Ashley mentioned earlier, whenever we had this transition in the narrative team where she became narrative director, I became lead writer, we got a little more control over what those guideposts were going to be. And she and I, and it's not just the narrative team by any stretch of the imagination that contributes to what the story is going to be. We pull in contributions and input from the design team, from the art teams, and talk about, like, you know, it's a lot of scope discussions, but it's also a lot of like, what kind of story do we want to tell? Because we don't want to just tell story through cutscenes and through barks. We want to tell story like through different types of gameplay, modes of gameplay, the different things that you do. So that's a conversation that's going to require a bunch of different people to come in. And if I just wrote all of it all by myself for years and years out, I don't think it would be very good. Like I mentioned earlier, I got my narrative career really going by giving feedback to people. And I think feedback is always necessary, and like kind of setting these generalized guideposts of where we want to go for each update allows opportunity for that kind of feedback to be given.
Yeah.
And to do all the things that I mentioned earlier, like making sure everything is cohesive, making sure the narrative goals that Ashley and other design leads set are going to be met in each different update. Ashley and I often say that she is, we work together really well because she is the why and I am the how when it comes to story, because she kind of guides me with these bigger picture ideas of like where we're going to end up in each update. And that could include location, that could include potential companions and characters, not necessarily all of them, just like ideas to get me started, like a springboard to jump off on. And we just have all these discussions where we decide like what's going to be the meat and potatoes of this update. And then I go in as we develop each update. Once we know more of like scope and what the gameplay is going to be, I go in behind and start writing the dialogue and add all the little details that get us from point A to point B in the story, add the little extras like the codex entries and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much a broad picture that's set. And as we move from beat to beat, we start filling in all the blank spaces.
Well, I mean, definitely don't sell yourself short. You're a leader in the industry at this point, and sort of that writing. I mean, we see it shine through in the characters as you're creating them, and as each new character that gets introduced, I'm like, oh, this is a great new character. I hope this character, we were introduced to Petra. Petra's a great new character. We wonder what's going to happen with Petra. Gizmo Gan, is that his name? Gizmo. What a
he's not new though.
That's a deep cut though.
He's not new. I mean, I was going to bring that up. He's like, how do you decide when you're going to bring a character in that we might have run across before? Like, I didn't know immediately who that guy was, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He's a quest giver on OG Ord Mantell. Like, it's like finding an Easter egg, really. Yeah.
I'm going to give away a little bit of my trade secrets here and reiterate something I said earlier, which is that the internet is my friend. I'm constantly Googling things. Wikipedia is not the only database out there. And luckily, I am a SWTOR game developer, so I have access to the tool set. I can look things up in there as well. But if I know, for instance, and it goes back to talking about the broader strokes and narrowing things down to details. If I know that the story is going to take place on OG Ord Mantell, or even a new spot of Ord Mantell, I know we want to bring back. I know that's a goal of ours, is to kind of do a throwback to the base game and bring back some old characters. There's lists out there I can go find that say what are the NPCs in Ord Mantell.
Oh,
and that will do. I mean, I've played the base game countless times, but it's impossible to remember every single person that you run into across 8 different class stories on all these different planets. So it's a good refresher, and I can look and see who all these old characters were. And when I see them, I remember who they are. So I saw Gizmo Gam and I was like, oh, that's the spice guy.
Yeah.
That guy would be a perfect person to have no scruples, no morals, and help anybody, including a Sith Lord, as long as he gets something out of it at the end.
Yeah, maybe he needs
he was a puzzle piece that fit perfectly in there.
A little force choke on his neck to get him in the head in the right direction. But, exactly. So
you must have to exercise
for their carrot,
You have to exercise great control, though, because if I was looking at those character lists, I'd be going, yeah, this one. Oh, yeah, this one good. This one. Yeah.
Those are thoughts that run through my head through the list, yes.
But what's so fantastic about the storytelling, especially recently, is that sometimes you get a person's character just by a couple of phrases and a look on their face. And I see that, happening between the two of you, right? Like, as you're writing the words and Ashley, you're making sure they have the right expression. That's how I view it anyway. I don't know how accurate that is.
I would say you hit the nail on the head. That's, because I write, I'm a words person. And Ashley comes from that cinematic background and comes from that place of guiding our narrative goals and guiding the emotions that we want players to feel. So she is constantly giving me the best feedback of let's trim this one word and leave it off on this emotion. It's a great marriage of the visual and the spoken together.
So let's get into that a little bit with you, Ashley, because I think that's an excellent point. I think of some of the cutscenes that we're seeing between Hedicole and Sahar and Rickon. And there's so much that where it's just the framing and the cinematic and without the dialogue. And for as, for where everything, getting everything that the game engine can give you to create emotion through what you see. How do you, how are you painting that picture for us for one? And then we can talk about how you do the architecture of the narrative outside of it as the second part of that.
It's, I don't know if we want to include this, but my favorite thing to say is we make excellent hot dogs in this coffee maker. We do things, we make the tool do things that it was never designed to do, but we know how to create detail with the tools that we have. And a lot of that just comes from years of using them. And so with the cinematic team, I'm often like, oh, you can get this expression if you do this, and just really weird 0.01 second tweaks to get those expressions across. Because all of those cutscenes are all hand edited by a cinematic designer. They have to place all of the animations, all of the cameras, everything is done by hand. And yeah, I think for me, kind of Caitlin alluded to it, what I'm always looking for is what is the base emotion, what is the intent, what is the aesthetic we're trying to achieve in that moment, and then how can everybody from their different disciplines feed into that, whether that's within the writing and the dialogue and the words that they're saying, or the expression that they have on their face, or the camera angle, because cameras themselves are actors and they tell a lot of emotion just in the way they frame. And so it's making all of those dance together in a very cohesive way.
See, I love talking to smart people like all three of you, because you get like the camera is an actor. I mean that.
Right, I wrote that down as soon as you said it. I'm like, I'm remembering that.
That's like film school right there. that Sema and I are learning. We of course have dreams of our own, content creation, the things that we do. Oh, I'm gonna have to remember that. I'm gonna have to speak to my camera as it's a person in the conversation.
But it's about the framing, right? It's that the framing, the way that's framed, the way the camera moves, the way the characters are positioned in the frame, all creates an emotion. And a lot of this is just because we have been around film and the film medium for, decades, almost over a century at this point. And so we've developed language within that. So like if you see a framing of this person's head is above this person's head, there's a certain power structure there. That is established. If you shoot someone from below versus if you shoot them from above, you're telling a different emotion with that.
Yeah.
And so the way the camera positions itself is basically like cliff notes almost of what you should be feeling when you see those characters.
Yeah. And I know this is one of your core skill sets. If you look at your portfolio over the history of your career, it's very focused has so much brilliant stuff around the cinematics in particular. But the other part of your role is also the architecture of the narrative as it expands potentially within and outside any particular bit of content. So how do you then bring in something like, I would love to go back to Ord Mantell, or let's make Ord Mantell a set piece, or we can't make XYZ a set piece, or this is, after this story is told, this is what's going to be left over. How is this going to impact the game going forward? I would expect that falls to you a lot with the architect of the narrative. What's your process in sort of making some of those decisions?
It's almost like I'm looking at where the in-universe narrative is, and then what the meta experience of it outside of it. Like, what is the player's experience of the narrative, and what worlds are we going to? What kinds of content have we built? What kind of stories have we told? And trying to create a balance of the types of content narratively that we're seeing. But then I work very closely with the other design leads and what kinds of content that they want to bring in, and talk about, okay, well, here's a suggestion, or here's like something I think that players would really enjoy at this point in our cycle and in this point of the story. And then we talk to them about what they would like to bring in terms of the gameplay and the systems and what worlds we'd like to explore. So it's very collaborative. But it's basically, for me, looking at the narrative, I'm trying to make sure that I'm seeing where we've been and what would be cool to go to, and make sure that all feels balanced. That
brings us to another question that I kind of had, and maybe even touches on something that, Keith, you need to sort of engage in, which is, I love this idea of visiting the old, existing planets. I like that we went back to Voss. I really like Ord Mantell. My first character was a trooper, so that was the first character I got to level cap. So I really like that. But then you also sort of mentioned new planets. You could sort of think about that. And us as Star Wars fans, we probably have a list of planets out there. There's other planets that we could be bringing in. I would expect that you would potentially have to work that out a little bit with people outside the studio, like Lucasfilm. So are there pieces of that you, Keith, then need to say, all right, well, let me see how that works, or guidance that you provide, or on the other side, as the player side, are there favorite planets that are on your list where you're telling Ashley, hey, we got to get Kashyyyk. Next update, whatever you do, we got to get Kashyyyk in there, because I'd really love to live there.
Very good. Right. Yeah. The answer to that is complicated in the sense is that if Caitlin Ann is looking at the story and it took her to Kashyyyk or took her to any other planet, we would look and say, does that planet exist? Does it exist in the Star Wars universe? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a brand new planet, right? And what she would write up is why we're going there, what's the story, what's the background. She'd get with Ashley and say, what is the makeup of that planet? And yes, we would take it to Lucasfilm along with the narrative in our brief, right? And we would have that discussion. And it would go through their process on their side, right? Whether or not their story people would thumbs up or thumbs down it, right? Or say, hey, we like this idea, but here's some changes we need to make. Keep in mind, we've been working with Lucasfilm, 16, 17 years now, right? We have a phenomenal relationship with them. They're just us, right? And we are them, right? We work together hand in hand with absolutely everything. We meet with them every week. We talk about things that are coming down the pike. We have annual meetings with them, right? They're not just our business partners, but they're also our friends. The answer to your question is it's complicated in the sense that we have a lot of validation we need to do internally and then also externally and make sure that we're all aligned. And if we are, then we move forward.
Yeah. So when players have these ideas of something that can happen, it's not just a matter of dev team is a monolith and why don't they just do X? There are all of these moving parts, both mechanically, both physically in the code, both architecturally, both with the technology, with the writing, with the narrative, and then with the business partners. So it's really, for us, it's really, for Sema and I, it's really fun to think about that, to think about all those layers, because I'm sort of used to working in that kind of environment. So yeah, I can imagine.
Well, and
it's complicated.
One of the things that we recently have been looking at a lot is because we have a lot of planets in the game. And revisiting those planets isn't just because we have them, it's because we want to build on them. We want to make the galaxy that we have feel bigger. And it's not just, we're going to go to all these new planets and we're going to invent things as we go. We want to flesh out and make everything feel alive. It was another reason bringing back old characters is that what have they been doing all this time? And you can kind of chart what their life was like. And so we're making it feel more alive rather than always introducing brand new content.
I mean, I personally am always excited when I hear that we're going back to a planet. Just so you know.
Agree.
That can be a data point for you.
Agree.
Sema likes it.
I mean, even from just looking at the galaxy map and then going to a planet and realizing as we're getting more and more, there's like multiple spots. These are full planets. There's the whole Star Wars art concept that each planet is a single biome. But even within that, there's a lot you can do and more places. And you've certainly done that with Ord Mantell. I mean, Ord Mantell it's still got the feel of Ord Mantell, but we were talking on the podcast last night of just loving the framing and the setting of here's sort of more of a remote town, a little bit of backwater, and you can kind of get that in the architecture of the town and the warren of shops and bars that are laid out there. But then there's the volcano and you're just like looking with the volcano as the backdrop. It's almost like a Pompeii camera shot as you're walking around the town. It's got the feel of Ord Mantell, but it's a new place. And now when I go to the galaxy map and I go to Ord Mantell, Ord Mantell is now suddenly more of a planet, not just a single military base. I love that concept.
I mean, since you bring that up too, we also get to hear all the new collection of little side comments as you walk through Ord Mantell. I love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't listen to you right now because I have a story to finish. And then I'm like, I do like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I commented on the Gaunt droid this morning to Ashley. If you have gone through that scene yet, right? There was a part, right? It just cracked me up. I just went, yep, I love this scene, right?
I love.
I won't spoil it for everybody. Look and figure it out for themselves.
Right. I love that interplay between different characters across Star Wars lore that have different attitudes towards droids, and bouncing those attitudes back and forth, and how droids are people or not people, and that's sort of a fun little twist of things going on there.
I'd like to think that our entire team is pretty pro droid. constant. And, like anytime we see a gonk or a mouse droid, we're just like, it's so cute.
Yeah,
So we're
droids are
very,
people too.
very into droids.
For our Star Wars, the 10 years of our Star Wars podcast, a droid was sort of our logo. We made up our own astromech. It was actually a series of astromechs. We had an astromech for every single episode. Now, we did kick them out in airlock, and they'd float around the galaxy and broadcast the episode to everybody. But we even made up a story of our own droid, the episode 0 droid that came back, and he had like this lifelong story. He became a bounty hunter, an astromech that became a bounty hunter, and we artistically rendered him and everything. So yeah, we're pro droid as well. So there's a good example that Keith said, a chunk of what's in 7.4. I'd love to hear from both Caitlin and Ashley too, just of the 7.4 stuff. What's your favorite part? And it doesn't have to be a story element, although it may very well be. I fought the world boss today. That was fun. There's that sales pitch voiceover that we saw that in Duxon as well. I love that. That cracks me up every time. What's the friendship purification beam or whatever that it's shooting at your face? So yeah.
And see, everything that's being mentioned, the gonk droid, the barks for the freedom droid.
Yeah.
These are all just pure examples of our collaboration and like the relationship that we have with each other as a team. Like these are all things, like I didn't just think of the stuff by myself. These are all from conversations that I've had with designers, that I've had with artists, that they suggest to me, that I suggest to them. And I just take everything and like whittle it down and hone it and polish it into the final product. But I mean, like I said, everything that's in there right now is the product of something that's been a huge collaboration among people.
So you name something then, Caitlin. What would one of your, not your top favorite, it doesn't have to be number one because it's hard to think of at the spur of the moment, but what's another favorite thing that you sort of got out of 7.4?
It's hard to choose. If I had to name something that I think is the most fun, it would be the two different things that you have to do, either if you're a Republic character or if you're an Imperial character, when you're trying to find your respective contact to meet on Ord Mantell. So if you're a Republic character, speaking of droids, when you're trying to find Blythe and you run into his assistant instead, the things that you have to do for him to find Blythe. And then on the imp side, speaking to the mechanics, I'll say, shop, and coming up with the different dialogue options to either play along or just flat out attack them. There's a little bit of extra special stuff in there if you're an Imperial agent, basically telling them like trying to teach them how to be good.
Do their job better.
That's hilarious.
Taking pity on them and telling them that they're not doing a good job.
Guys.
I'm gonna have to get my agent out there and see that.
And a saboteur option too. I noticed. They're like, I'm like, no, all right, guys, just back it up a bit. I don't
think you know who I am. I'm gonna
let me get your boss on the phone because I'm on the inside here.
Writing that stuff and coming up with, like I said, the Imperial agent specific stuff and the smuggler specific stuff on the Republic side. When you're dealing with Black Sun smugglers, they're like, oh, look at this old person who went off and came back. What do we care about you anymore? And just coming up with the class specific stuff was really a lot of fun and seeing it be implemented. That's exactly what I was going for. So I'm glad people were picking up what I was putting down. But on the flip side, that was having the most fun. But I think maybe overall, my most favorite thing is just the more emotional moments with the characters that are your companions in this. I don't want to spoil too much, but definitely with Petra and the person who shows up at the end. Just writing it felt really great. I felt a lot of intensity, a lot of emotion just writing stuff, and just getting the positive feedback that I got from Ashley and from the world design team and the encounter designer who was building the final boss fight that, is kind of wrapped around those scenes. Just getting all that like initial feedback felt really good. And then just seeing the scene slowly come together as Ashley was like iterating on it and just hearing the music come online and just seeing
must be
that
amazing.
And looking at that and saying it's like, that's a Star Wars moment. If I do pat myself on the back, that's a good Star Wars moment. And getting that out there felt really good.
And I hope everybody's excited too, because that really moves the overarching arc of the story forward at that point, which is interesting. All right. How about you, Ashley? What was your favorite thing?
I mean, the thing I love to do in 7.4 is mainly just walk through the city. As a player, I love walking through and seeing all the details that our world design and our team put together to make it feel so alive. Like you mentioned, the barks, or the things that people are saying around the town. One of our designers went and made sure there's business going on with everybody there. They all are having a conversation. They're getting food. They're just chilling. They're buying crops. Like there's so much life in that city.
And is that a term, barks?
Yes. Yeah. Barks is lines of dialogue that just fire in gameplay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
They're barking at you.
Yeah. I forget. Yeah, it's more common in game development, but it's not always external.
I love it.
Yeah,
I agree that town is great. I have a thing in all of SWTOR where I love to find the best bars and go hang out. And there are some great ones that keep getting implemented. Meksha has some spectacular bars with even there's a drink that you can pick up and that you go into the.
Is Paxton Rawl in there?
Paxton Rawl is everywhere. Paxton Rawl is in like half the bars in the galaxy when you have to.
I know.
He's great. But
that one
town.
bar on the one bar in Keston's Landing, and I was like, oh, what's that weird shadow? And I look up and like, huge fan, and it's just a really cool, like the way it casts the light and everything. It's just very, very pretty.
It does seem like you were able to also expand the art in that town. A lot of the original planets are very sort of, they have a relatively flat color palette, I feel like. It's like shades of brown, or this one is shades of orange on Voss. But when I was walking around the town, Keston's Landing, there's like red light area, and then there's like blue or white lights off in the distance, and it seems like the tech is shining through in what you're able to sort of twist and turn within the engine these days. Is that the case too? Are we getting glimpses of that?
I think we're getting more creative with our limitations and how we're building, but I think there was also an intention with Keston's Landing to make a space that we could create for both Republic and Imperial characters. So there's kind of a little bit of zone in the city where the Imperial characters are going or where the Republic characters are going. It's really subtle, but it's a way to make it feel like, both factions could be here and it doesn't feel out of place.
Okay.
But there are technical changes that are happening in the game, right? I keep hearing about the limitations of the engine we have, but we are surrounding that, as you mentioned earlier, with all the tech that we're improving, and we'll continue to improve over time. That won't eliminate a lot of it, but we'll reduce it, right? Give us less frictions on certain aspects, right? We're now in the cloud because we've now removed that entire structure. People were talking about, why did we open up the APAC server, for example? It was because we could, right? Yeah. Or before, it wasn't just because of population. It actually had nothing to do with the business decision that was made. It had to do with the tech and the cost of running that in that region. And now the cost is manageable, right? Because we moved to the cloud, right? And there'll be other technology improvements that we do over the next few years. You mentioned 64-bit. You mentioned our launcher. We've got animation improvements, graphic improvements, right? A bunch of stuff coming down the pike, right? That really helps with that limitation. The
amazing guys that we're getting glimpses of, which I'm sure that tech we're going to see more of that in the future. We're loving that.
And you've seen the art changes that we make with our existing engine now, right? Our backgrounds and the environments are gorgeous, right?
The textures of the new characters. Sahar.
Yep, and we have an inclination to go back to all the old planets and up-res all those too, right? So that'll be cool if you can get that done.
Cool.
Right?
I've really been enjoying seeing players go back through the class stories with the new lighting, because having the new cinematic lighting across the game and everybody's like, oh my God, my character's so beautiful. Like it's really nice to literally put everything in a new light. It's really cool to be able to share that, because we've been, like I said on the stream, we've been putting that tech like since Runic into scenes manually, and then just to have it turned on for the game was really, really exciting. So getting a whole like new coat of paint on everything is incredible.
Again, from a cinema, from a film perspective, I'm sure that's got to be really exciting for you to sort of see that realized dynamically. Then sort of back propagated through all of the other cutscenes. It's got to be great.
Yeah, and there was a lot of testing we did and a lot of tweaking to make sure that we were doing as much justice as we could across that much content. Like we couldn't look at every single scene, but that we were creating tech that would serve as many scenes well as possible. So it's just every time we do anything that affects the entire game, we go, okay, well, we have hundreds of hours of cutscenes. Like, how are we going to prioritize, and how are we going to make sure that we're keep getting eyes on it, as much of it as possible? And we'll continue to improve it over time. But it's very exciting to do big changes like that, but it is also a lot of checking things.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right. To sort of bring us home here, we're scratching the surface, and Keith, you alluded it to a little bit about what could be coming. I know we can't ever get too deep, and as Yoda would say, the future is always in motion, or always in motion is the future. What could you tell us so far? Now that we've got,
what would you like to say about the future?
Wicked,
yeah,
7.4 is old news.
Old news now. Yeah,
what's coming next?
Yeah, it only happened a couple of days ago, and it's old news, right? Well, that's kind of tough because like you said, we got a producer letter coming out. We'll identify a few things, but with some nuggets we can give you, right? We know what our story is going to be, and therefore the design over the next year, right? We have that pretty well laid out. We know what we're doing, right? Thematically throughout the next year. There's some additional things we want to get done that we're discussing now that may or may not be directly related to the inside of the game, right? So I'm not going to tell you any other details, but it's some cool stuff, right? We're learning a lot about what's happening on that new fresh server in the APAC region.
Yes.
For those of us that have played the game for a long time, right, have gone back and redoing those stories, it is exciting.
It is.
It's just fun to just revisit the entire game without worrying about money, right? Or worrying about money. It's just, you don't have any credits. And what are you going to do? You have to farm and have to do some stuff. And then for me, just watching all of those objectives happen. So I look and say, how do you take that same experience and bring it to everybody in the entire world, right? So we have those thoughts. We haven't figured it out yet, right? But we are kicking those stones over to see what can we do to make it so that everybody has that same experience. And I'm sure we'll be announcing some things. We'll kick some ideas out to all our content providers and say, what do you think about these things, right? Because what's the difference, I think, right now is we're very open to having conversations with folks. We did a survey recently, right?
Yep.
That's revealed a lot of things, right? And so if there's changes that people want, they just need to understand that, right, we're willing to listen. We may not necessarily do what they want, right? But we are very willing to listen, right?
Because every time you ask the question, you will get at least 50% of the answers are going to conflict with the other 50% of the answers, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of other answers across the spectrum. So we won't. I would never expect to get everything I would ever ask for, because it's not even physically possible. But that sounds fun and interesting. So just to sort of leave it there, the Shea Vizsla, that feel of a fresh start server, and the number of, I think, like North America and an old server players that are playing on it, both speaks well to the tech. If we could get rid of the pesky speed of light, it would be perfect in every region, no matter where you play. But that fresh start feel, I think, is really fun for a lot of people, and I think we're only like learning how fun it is by getting in there and playing. So that's interesting that you guys are seeing it too.
Yeah, I really love playing over there. I didn't expect to. And I don't know why, because I do this all the time. But yeah. I feel excited
how many
now.
You have like 5 characters now.
No, I have 4, and I'm going to make another one over the weekend. But now I think I'm just going to make all 8. like Keith. Now my aspiration is to
do legendaries down.
Yeah.
Right. So
I'm going for legendary.
She wants to fill out that heroic moment bar.
I do. That's what's pushing me right now.
That's it. I've got the 4 buffs already, so it's nice. And I got to work on the other side. So
dang. Well, that's great.
And we have a lot of story content coming up that we're already planning and talking about, and we're very excited about. There's stuff coming out next year that Caitlin and I have been working on, and we're just we're excited about everything we make. But this one, I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I'm just chomping at the bit, and I want to tell you about it, but I can't. So I'll just leave it at that.
You just have to pick a date when we're going to do it, right?
I have some favorite characters that I hope we get to hear more from.
Oh my gosh,
here and there. So we'll have to see what happens there in the future as well.
As we all would.
Hint, hint.
I don't know if we can say this or not, but when Jackie was talking about the thing that Ashley's talking about, and Jackie wanting us to, when we can't. Yep.
Yep.
Whenever we can finally announce the thing that Ashley and I really want to announce, if we want to put out a letter to talk about it, and Ashley and I are just going to put out a letter that says this finally in all caps, the exclamation point, and says "Love Caitlin and Ashley."
Excellent. Excellent.
That's how long we've been waiting.
Yes, that's awesome.
We're
do it.
Eagerly awaiting all of that, and I know I joked about 7.4 is old news, but it's actually just the start. This is going to be a really fun, few months for us. We're super excited as players. We're starting tonight with our ops team in upgrading all of our gear. We're going to go get a bunch of tech frags to get the rest of our gear up, start farming new OP1 catalysts so we can get our Arcada gear up to 344. Finally get ourselves into, because we haven't even finished R4 yet. We haven't finished the final fight. We've been in there weekly for a long time, but we haven't finished the final fight because we only play for an hour or two a week. But maybe even vet mode then. So we've got a lot. We've got the rep, we got the dailies, we got new world boss, we got fun for our whole guild. So we do certainly want to say thank you to all 3 of you and the rest of the Broadsword team and the Star Wars The Old Republic team there. We've certainly had fun for years and years and years now. And this has been a great, great year. We're going to do our roundup of stuff by the end of the year, I'm sure. But this has been a big year for you all. And we want to say thanks.
And thank you for spending your time with us here today, too. That's awesome.
Thank you for being big fans of the game.
We'll keep an eye out for the producer letter. We'll keep an eye out for more story. We'll be playing in your world. Come to us anytime if you've got any questions. But I think we can leave it for today. So thanks.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for having us.